This is the ghost of a nightmare, preserved in radar data. A Piper Saratoga, call sign 9253 November, falling out of the sky. In the cockpit was John F. Kennedy Jr., and in his final 3 minutes, he found himself in a battle for his life, a battle he didn't even know he was losing. This isn't just a story about a famous name. It's about how the sky can lie, how your senses can betray you, and how a pilot can lose all control in an instant. The radar shows us what happened, but the real story is how. The golden couple and the mounting pressure. On the evening of July 16, 1999, John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn Bessette, and her sister Lauren were getting ready for what should have been a simple, happy trip. They were flying to Martha's Vineyard for the wedding of John's cousin, Rory Kennedy. To the world, they were modern American royalty. He was the handsome, charismatic son of a beloved president who grew up in the public eye. She was a chic, enigmatic fashion publicist for Calvin Klein whose style captivated everyone. Their love story started like a movie scene, a chance meeting in a New York showroom that led to an instant, intense connection. But their romance unfolded under the relentless glare of the media. They married in a secret ceremony on a remote Georgia island in 1996, trying to find a moment of privacy, but it only fueled the public's obsession. The paparazzi became a constant, suffocating presence. Every argument, like a now infamous public fight in a park, became tabloid fodder. Carolyn, not born into this life of scrutiny, struggled with the attention. Friends would later say she was terrified of the cameras, which helped create a narrative of a troubled marriage. By the summer of 1999, the pressure was mounting. John was dealing with financial struggles at his political magazine, George. The couple was also coping with the impending death of John's cousin and best friend, Anthony Radzawal, from cancer. Reports from friends suggest the marriage was under significant strain, with the couple even attending marriage counseling. Lauren Bessette was reportedly joining them on the flight not just for her own weekend plans, but to act as a hopeful mediator. It was against this backdrop of personal turmoil that they headed to Essex County Airport, unaware their story was about to become an American tragedy. A chain of small, fateful decisions. Aviation disasters are rarely the result of a single, catastrophic failure. More often, they're the end of a chain of small, seemingly unrelated decisions that line up just right to create a window for tragedy. The final flight of 9253 November was a textbook example of this deadly domino effect. The first domino was the pilot himself. John F. Kennedy Jr. was a relatively new pilot, having earned his license just 15 months before the accident. The NTSB estimated he had a respectable 310 total hours of flight time. But the devil is in the details. Only about 72 of those hours were flown without an instructor. Even more critically, he had only about 36 hours in the high-performance Piper Saratoga he'd recently bought, and just 3 of those hours were flown without a certified flight instructor on board. His solo night flying experience in that specific plane. Less than an hour. Kennedy was not instrument rated. This is a crucial distinction. A pilot with a Standard Visual Flight Rules (VFR) license is required to fly by looking outside, using the horizon and other visual cues. An instrument rating, which Kennedy was working on, allows a pilot to fly in low visibility by relying solely on the plane's instruments. He had passed the written exam and completed about half of the required training lessons. His instructors noted that while he had the ability to fly on instruments, he struggled with managing multiple tasks at once. One instructor even offered to fly with him that night, but Kennedy declined, saying he wanted to do it alone. The second domino was the timing. The flight was delayed. They took off at 8:38 p.m., well after sunset, pushing what could have been a daylight flight into the challenging realm of night flying. The final domino was the weather. While technically legal for a VFR flight, the conditions were insidious. The sky wasn't stormy. In fact, the winds were calm. However, it had been a hot, hazy July day. Over land, city lights provided some reference. But as Kennedy's route took him out over the 30-mile stretch of water toward Martha's Vineyard, a critical change occurred. Other pilots flying that night reported that the haze completely obscured the horizon, creating a seamless void where the black water met the black sky. There were no stars, no moon, no lights, no visual way to tell up from down. Kennedy didn't file a required flight plan or get an official weather briefing. He was a VFR pilot, flying a powerful plane he had little solo experience with, into darkening conditions known to create a featureless black hole over the ocean. Every link in the chain was now in place. The science of betrayal, a pilot's worst nightmare. To understand what happened in that cockpit, you have to understand one of the most terrifying dangers in aviation, spatial disorientation. It's the moment a pilot's brain can no longer correctly interpret the plane's position, altitude, or speed. It's a condition where your own senses, the very system designed to keep you safe, betray you with lethal results. On the ground, our sense of balance comes from our inner ears, working in perfect harmony with our eyes and the nerves in our muscles. As long as you can see a stable horizon, your brain has a reliable reference point. But in an airplane, at night, over water, in haze, that reference point can vanish. Now, the pilot is completely dependent on their inner ear. And this is where the betrayal begins. The fluid-filled canals of the inner ear are great at detecting sharp, sudden movements, but they are terrible at sensing slow, gradual ones. Imagine you're the pilot. Unable to see a horizon, you unknowingly let one wing dip slightly, starting a very slow, gentle turn. Because it's so gradual, the fluid in your inner ear doesn't signal a change. You feel like you're flying straight and level. As the turn continues, the plane's nose naturally starts to drop, and you begin to lose altitude and gain speed. This is the entry into what pilots call the graveyard spiral. Still feeling like you're level, you might notice the altitude loss on your instruments. Your instinct is to pull back on the controls to bring the nose up. But because the plane is in a bank, pulling back only tightens the spiral, making the descent even steeper. Now you're in a deadly feedback loop. The instruments are all screaming that the plane is in a steep, descending turn. But your body, the seat of your pants, feeling, is telling you that you are flying wings level or maybe even climbing. In this moment of sensory conflict, the brain has to choose, trust the instruments, or trust the feeling it has relied on its entire life. Without recent and extensive instrument training, the instinct to trust your body is overwhelming. It is a battle pilots are biologically programmed to lose. This is a pilot's worst nightmare. You are fighting for control, but you don't even know which way is up. The sky has become a liar, and your own body is its accomplice. Understanding spatial disorientation is critical to understanding the final moments of this flight. If you find this kind of in-depth aviation analysis valuable, consider subscribing. We go beyond the headlines to explore the science and human factors behind these critical events, and your support helps us keep creating this content. The final 3 minutes, a reconstruction of the death spiral. The FAA's radar data paints a chilling, second-by-second portrait of a pilot losing a battle he couldn't see. For the first part of the flight, everything appeared normal. Kennedy flew along the Connecticut coast, then turned his Piper Saratoga southeast, out over the dark expanse of Rhode Island Sound. At approximately 9:38 p.m., about 34 miles from Martha's Vineyard, the trouble started. Kennedy began descending from his cruising altitude and initiated a right turn. The rate of descent began to increase. He was flying directly into the black pit that pilots had warned about, a world without a horizon. It's here that spatial disorientation likely began its insidious work. Kennedy, perhaps distracted while preparing for his approach, may not have noticed the gradual onset of the bank. His instructor had noted he could struggle with managing multiple tasks. A shocking detail that later emerged from the NTSB investigation was that his radio was likely set to the wrong frequency, meaning he couldn't communicate with air traffic control if he tried. The radar shows the plane stopping its descent at 2,200 feet, then briefly climbing. This suggests Kennedy recognized he was off his intended altitude and tried to correct it. But without a visual horizon, his physical sensations were now at war with his instruments. This is where the death spiral truly took hold. While in that brief climb, the aircraft entered a left turn. Then, the descent began again, this time more aggressively. Confused, and fighting powerful but false sensations from his inner ear, he likely did what many disoriented pilots do: he overcorrected. The radar data shows the aircraft abruptly rolling from the left turn into a sharp right turn. It was this final, fatal maneuver that sealed their fate. As the plane banked sharply right, the rate of descent exploded. The NTSB report indicates it eventually exceeded 4,700 feet per minute. That's a fall of nearly 80 feet per second. The aircraft was no longer flying, it was plunging in a tight, out-of-control spiral. From the moment the fatal turn began to the moment of impact, only about 30 seconds passed. 30 seconds of terrifying confusion, of G-forces building as the spiral tightened. At 9:41 p.m., Piper Saratoga 9253 November struck the Atlantic Ocean nose first. The impact was catastrophic, and all three occupants were killed instantly. They were found days later, still strapped in their seats, in the wreckage about 120 feet below the surface. When the plane failed to arrive, a massive search was launched. The nation held its breath, but when Navy divers located the wreckage 7.5 miles offshore, the grim reality set in. The National Transportation Safety Board's investigation was meticulous. They found no evidence of any pre-impact mechanical failure. The conclusion was clear: the probable cause was the pilot's failure to maintain control of the airplane during a descent over water at night, which was a result of spatial disorientation. Factors in the accident were haze and the dark night. In the aftermath, the Bessette family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Kennedy's estate, which was settled out of court, a move consistent with the NTSB's finding of pilot error. But the real story isn't one of blame, it's one of caution. John F. Kennedy Jr. was not a reckless pilot. Instructors described him as diligent and cautious. But on one fateful night, he found himself at the convergence of several classic risk factors: a low-experienced pilot in a high-performance aircraft, flying at night, over water, in hazy conditions that eliminated the horizon. He fell victim to get-there-itis, the dangerous mindset that pressures a pilot to complete a flight despite deteriorating conditions. The crash of 9253 November is now a powerful case study used to teach pilots about the lethal danger of spatial disorientation. It serves as a stark reminder that the sky demands absolute respect, and that even on a calm night, the most dangerous instrument in the cockpit can be the pilot's own senses. The tragedy is not that a famous man died, but that 3 lives were lost in a preventable accident, a pilot's worst nightmare made terrifyingly real in the dark waters off Martha's Vineyard.